If you ever thought that the homelessness crisis only occurs in economically prosperous cities like San Francisco or Los Angeles, it's time to think again. Right in Alpena, Michigan, a small town of fewer than 10,000 people, once hailed as the gem of the North, is now struggling to cope with a homelessness pandemic. Tattered tents sprout along the roadside, the elderly sleep in broken down cars, and families that were once stable now struggle each night in a Walmart parking lot. In this documentary, we will take you to the depths of a harsh reality behind the rustic beauty of Alpena. Lies a homelessness crisis that is no less devastating than any major city. If you are thinking about leaving the city to seek a new beginning in the peaceful countryside, watch this video before making a decision. Because this is not just the story of Alpena, this is a wake-up call for all of America. Don't let the peaceful appearance of Alpena fool you. Behind the quiet streets of this place lies a crisis silently growing, where just a small event can wipe out a family's lifelong efforts. The town that was once a symbol of stability has now become incredibly fragile. Alpena Fairgrounds, once bustling with summer fairs and bright lights, has now become the capital of old tents packed closely together, stretched by thin tarps, secured by ropes and worn-out hope. The number of homeless people in Alpena has skyrocketed, from 302 in 2022 to nearly 700 in just 2 years, nearly 2.5 times. But the most haunting thing is that 60% of them have never been in this situation before. 28% are still working full-time, but their income is not keeping up with rent prices. 35% are single women, shouldering their families alone amid the crisis, and 20% are elderly people, living on social security benefits that have lagged behind living costs for many years. They all have one thing in common: they once lived stable lives, once had plans, once believed that hard work would be enough to keep a roof over their heads. However, they were the first to fall, and also the ones who fell the hardest when the system began to shake. Because when society experiences upheaval, the vulnerable are correspondingly suffer the most. Someone once said, "You are just 3 unpaid paychecks away from homelessness." And in Alpena, that is no longer a warning. That is the reality: a broken car, a day of being fired, a medical bill, and so the whole family, parents and children, have to live in a car or in a filthy corner of the street. And for many people, winter on the streets will perhaps be the longest winter of their lives, and possibly for the rest of their lives, because once they fall out of the system, they not only lose their home, but also the chance to come back. The Alpena authorities know they are on the brink. The meetings at City Hall are starting to become more tense. Civil groups are meeting to find solutions, but no one dares to promise anything specific, because this is no longer just about a few homeless people, but a sign of a structure cracking in pieces. Each family, each individual, like small bricks being pushed out, gradually revealing the gaps beneath the seemingly solid foundation. So, if a small town like Alpena, once considered a peaceful vacation destination, has now become a place where the elderly have to burn their jackets in the woods to stay warm, what is truly in store for other regions across America? And if those who were once stable can no longer find a place in this shared home, then who truly still has a place? There are fires lit not to warm the cold night, but to plunge entire lives into ashes. And in Alpena, Michigan, amidst the 20-degree sway of cold, such a fire has arrived, terrifyingly. That fire did not come from the fireplace, but from hell. A dry, cracking explosion tore through the night, then flames erupted from the second floor. In the blink of an eye, the old wooden house on North 2nd Avenue, where many families lived together, turned into a sea of bright red flames against the white snow. The people of Alpena are no strangers to the winter cold. But that night, the cold was overshadowed by the indifferent flames, something no one expected would take their homes away so quickly. Firefighters fought for 6 hours to extinguish the flames. One of them was injured and taken to the hospital. But the most ruthless thing is not the burn, but the void left in the eyes of the survivors. Because the greatest loss is not the house, It was the sense of security they once believed would always be there. The dream of a stable life, a home that could not be taken away overnight, has now turned to ashes, leaving a void that no words of comfort can fill. Those who once had an address, paid taxes, and walked their children to school, now stand amidst the ashes, receiving thin blankets from relief groups and searching for the remnants of hope. Alpena victims' advocates are present to provide temporary housing, but everyone knows that temporary can stretch for many years if you are poor. And then, they too blend into the ever-growing line of homeless people in Alpena, where the number of homeless individuals has nearly doubled in just 2 years. From an unexpected accident to the beginning of a long-term tragedy. If just one fire can consume an entire home, both the past and future of a family, then what will be left for those who have no one to call their name? No place to return to, and deeper still, how many of us are living on the fragile edge of that collapse without even knowing? If you think that homeless people are always those huddled on the sidewalks, rummaging through trash for food, or setting up tents under bridges, then perhaps you have overlooked a group of people, silent, invisible, growing up among us without anyone noticing. Because there are children, still wearing uniforms to school, but at night, they don't know where they will sleep. In Alpena, there are at least 105 students living in such circumstances. No permanent home, no stable caregivers, just nights spent couch surfing, meals from charities, and long, restless nights. Monica Smith is one of them. At 17, just before her senior year of high school, she was abandoned by her family, without any fuss. No one knew.
I don't even know where I'm sleeping, where my meal's coming from. I don't have a way to school. I don't know if I'm gonna have a roof over my head tonight. I just couch surfed a lot.
It's heartbreaking when a child who hasn't fully matured has to live in a state of not knowing where they will sleep tonight or where their next meal will come from. Monica doesn't wander the streets. She just silently disappears from homework assignments, from the attendance list. And it wasn't until a teacher noticed her prolonged absence that the door to help finally opened. Thanks to the McKinney-Vento program, Monica was provided with temporary housing, food, and transportation assistance, enough for her to continue her education and complete high school.
That actually kind of brought her to the attention of appropriate adults so that she could get qualified and get some help. And she was able to graduate with her graduating class.
She has graduated, without family by her side. She still had a friend who extended a helping hand, providing her with a place to sleep, faith, and the opportunity to continue her journey at Alpena Community College. The dream has never faded. It has only been temporarily overshadowed by long, uncertain nights. But perhaps the most heartbreaking thing is that children like Monica do not look like homeless people. They don't wander the street corners. They are silent and try to appear normal. And that is what has made society easily forget the children who have lost a part of their childhood on the streets. We often think of the homeless as adults, but if there are hundreds of children without homes who still go to school every day, then are we missing something in our education and humanitarian systems? Did you know that in Michigan today, an average of 48% of renters, nearly half, are spending more than 30% of their income just on housing among them? Up to 26% have to spend more than half of their income on housing costs. This situation becomes even more severe in areas like Alpena, where rental prices continue to soar while wages remain almost stagnant. Alpena County, with a population of only about 10,197 people, was once considered an affordable place, especially in terms of housing prices. But now, up to 20% of renters in Alpena are spending more than 50% of their income on housing, and that makes even a seemingly simple one-bedroom apartment out of reach. Across the state of Michigan, households currently spend an average of 26% of their income on housing. In Alpena County alone, in 2022, 21% of households had to spend more than 30% of their income on rent, a slight decrease from 24% in 2017. But even that slight decrease still reveals a bitter truth: incomes are not increasing. While all basic costs continue to weigh heavily on the shoulders of the people, those are the elderly living on pensions, the single mother trying to keep a roof over her child's head, all of them are living on a fragile thread. According to the 2023 Alice report, 62% of black people and 44% of Hispanic people in Michigan are working but not making ends meet. In Alpena, nearly 45% of the population belongs to the Alice group, those who work every day but still cannot cover their living expenses. And this is not just a cold number, but a silent cry from a community struggling with bills, living expenses, and increasingly limited choices. This tragedy does not only stem from the lack of affordable housing, it also stems from the aging housing infrastructure. In Alpena alone, more than 70% of the urban housing was built over 60 years ago. Repairing and renovating these old houses is a significant financial burden, especially for low-income individuals. Although the state has implemented the Housing Choice Vouchers program, helping nearly 65,000 households with children find housing, the gap between policy on paper and actual homes remains significant. In Alpena, local authorities are under significant pressure to expand the supply of affordable housing while ensuring that those vouchers do not get stuck in the administrative system. The reality shows that a family in the Alice group with an income of $40,000 per year has to spend about £1,000 each month just on rent. Just one late paycheck, one car breakdown. They are forced to choose between rent and medicine, between car repairs and their child's tuition. And if they can't pay, they are quickly pushed to the margins of society, falling into stress, hunger, insomnia, then homelessness. The house fires you've heard about are just the last straw when the entire system has already cracked at its roots. That is why many experts emphasize the importance of naturally occurring affordable housing, that is, low-cost homes without subsidies, which account for up to 47% of the total rental homes in Michigan. These houses are not protected, not invested in for new construction, and can disappear at any time if land prices increase, making the housing crisis even more severe. In Alpena, local authorities have proposed solutions such as renovating old houses, building small apartments suitable for singles and the elderly like studios or 1-2 bedroom houses. If even a simple roof over one's head has become a luxury, then what is left for the most decent and hard-working people out there? Alpena, a small town in Michigan with a population of over 10,000, is becoming one of the places facing an increasingly severe homelessness crisis. And amidst that storm, the temporary shelter programs, which were once considered a stopgap solution, are now bearing the role of an entire welfare system. Sunrise Mission is one of the few shelters that still maintains regular operations in the area. This non-profit organization provides beds, meals, and temporary support for the homeless, both men and women, including families with children. However, with a limited number of beds and an increasingly tight budget, Sunrise cannot meet the ever-growing demand. They often have to turn away people in need simply because there are no more spots available. In addition, All Saints Catholic Parish, although still awaiting official approval from the city, has proactively opened a temporary shelter within the church grounds, with only 9 beds, operating from 8 PM to 8 AM. This centre still strives to be a refuge for those who have no other options. But can you imagine just 9 beds for an entire community of thousands at risk of losing their homes? What is the reality? All organisations are overwhelmed. The regular shelters are full. Some people have to go back to living in their cars. There are families who have to let their children sleep at a friend's house, even if it's just for a few nights. And there are those, just because they lack a temporary shelter, whose health, spirit, and even life-changing opportunities are completely swept away. In a country that once prided itself on being a land of opportunity, the fact that a person cannot find a place to stay overnight is perhaps the clearest evidence of the system's breakdown. The shelters, which were supposed to be temporary stops, are now becoming permanent homes for hundreds of people. But how can it be called a home when every morning you have to leave before the sun rises and you're not sure if there will still be a bed for you tonight? Amidst the darkness of a Michigan winter, where the cold seeps through every crack and penetrates deep into the heart, there is a small light at it that still flickers, not enough to warm the entire town, but enough to hold on to hope for those who seem to have been abandoned by the world. That is Sunrise Mission, without a huge budget, nor favoured by the authorities. Sunrise Mission exists thanks to the goodwill of local benefactors, churches and volunteers who quietly give away each hot meal, each clean blanket, and each word of encouragement in despair. And in those humble rooms, people not only find a place to sleep, but also rediscover the feeling of being human. Sunrise Mission started as an emergency shelter for the homeless, but gradually, they became the last resort for many people. The centre has separate shelters for men and women, and also supports families with young children, something that not many facilities in the area can do. With nearly 2,000 service visits each year, they not only save people from the cold, but also help them rebuild their lives. In addition to providing shelter and food, Sunrise also supports people in finding employment, restoring their spirits, connecting with medical services, and securing long-term housing. But they cannot do it all by themselves, not because of a lack of trust, but because of a lack of support from the public system. If you ever believe that no one in America has to sleep on the street, come here quietly and listen to someone who once had a home, a job, who was once a classmate of your child, tell you how they lost everything. If a place like Sunrise Mission no longer exists, then those people, and perhaps even ourselves in the future, where will we have to return to? Alpena used to be a quaint, peaceful town where the elderly lived close together like long-time neighbours, where children played ball under the evening light, and everyone knew each other's names when they walked into the grocery store. But in recent years, that warmth has been gradually fading, replaced by worried glances, silent closed doors, and the cold wind blowing through the empty houses. The homelessness crisis in Alpena is no longer an isolated phenomenon. It is a manifestation of a profound and silent wave of change. When affordable housing is no longer available, when social services are being cut back, when stable jobs are gradually disappearing, the gap between having a roof over your head and being pushed out onto the street becomes more fragile than ever. In 2025, a report from the Michigan League for Public Policy warned that nearly 40% of people in rural Michigan are spending more than 30% of their income on rent, a threshold that experts consider to be the housing cost burden. With a local economy heavily reliant on manual labour, seasonal work, and limited welfare, Alpena is becoming a stark example of the working full-time but still homeless phenomenon. Worse yet, the harsh weather of northern Michigan makes this situation exponentially more dangerous. It can get as cold as 20 degrees in the winter here, and for those who cannot afford shelters, the only options left are makeshift tents, old car seats, or someone's porch. Many people have to choose to sleep in their cars, the last thing that still offers a bit of privacy and a sense of belonging, until the car is towed away or the police knock on the door at midnight. Charitable organisations like Sunrise Mission can help some people, but they cannot replace the role of policies, budgets and responsibilities from the government level. Meanwhile, hundreds of people, including children, the elderly and workers, are still drifting between the boundaries of having a home and having nothing at all. Is it time for us to stop thinking that the homelessness crisis is only an issue for big cities, and face the truth that crisis has infiltrated every small town, every familiar home, and perhaps even into our own future? If Alpena, a peaceful town with low crime, once a place where you could leave your car unlocked and still know it would be safe, is also witnessing a quiet increase in homelessness, then this is no longer just the story of one place. It is an early draft, full of warnings, for the larger picture about America. Because Alpena does not have bustling main streets, rampant crime, or a steady influx of immigrants, the reasons often cited to explain the homelessness crisis in major cities like Los Angeles or San Francisco. Yet, there are still hundreds of students without stable homes, adults living in cars or sheltering in churches, and charitable organisations overwhelmed by demand far exceeding their capacity to provide. That is what makes Alpena's story so frightening. It proves that you don't need to live in a crumbling metropolis to become homeless. You just need to lose a job, a car, or a subsidy. You just need to live in a place where rent increases faster than wages, and that's enough for your whole life to collapse like a domino effect. Alpena is just a snapshot, but a real, painful, and incredibly important one to clearly see that this crisis is no longer confined to distant or worrisome places. It is approaching every door that we thought was safe. And if we continue to ignore, continue to think, that doesn't happen in my town, then maybe one day, your town will also appear on the crisis map, like Alpena today. So, how many more towns need to fall into darkness before America realizes that this is no longer a crisis, but a system that is breaking down? When children have to hide their instability behind their uniforms, when the elderly sleep in cars to give their homes to their grandchildren, when families have to choose between rent and dinner, then America is no longer a dream, but an unsolvable problem. Alpena is not an exception. It is merely an early mirror reflecting what many places will have to face if we continue to be indifferent. The homelessness crisis is no longer a distant warning from big cities. It is creeping into places that seem the most peaceful. It touches those who once lived the most stable lives. And if even places like Alpena are no longer safe enough to hold on to the American dream, then the question for all of us is there still a place in this country that can protect our children and ourselves from the risk of being forgotten? What do you think about the homelessness crisis in Alpena? Please share your thoughts in the comments section. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support the channel and stay updated with our latest videos. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video. All information in the video is compiled from reliable press sources, research, and reports, aiming to provide an analytical and reflective overview. We do not represent any organisation, government, or individual mentioned, and we do not intend to discredit or attack any party. Viewers should consult multiple sources to gain a more comprehensive and objective perspective.